Shabbat Shalom, my friends. It is traditional to dedicate a time of serious text study to mark the occasion of the passing of a real Torah scholar. So on your behalf, I will be dedicating our conversation this morning to the memory of Rabbi Dr. Aaron Pankin, who died in a tragic airplane crash this past Saturday afternoon, just about a week. Aaron was a scholar of the Talmud. He was president of the Hebrew Union College, a tremendous supporter of the State of Israel, a true mensch, and a friend of mine. Zecher Tzadik Livracha, may his memory ever be for a blessing. Well, we end our reading of the book of Leviticus this week with twin Sedras, Behar, Behukotai, beginning with Leviticus 25, verse 1 and following. And that means ending a book. That means a Siyyum. That might mean slivovitz. It surely means creamed herring, gefilte fish. We celebrate each milestone in our Torah study, and then we plunge ahead next week into the fourth of the 5 books of Moses, the book of Numbers. And as we do so, we'll proclaim at the end of this little study too, Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek, let us be strong, let us be strong, let us strengthen one another. So, okay, here we are, Behar, Behukotai. What do? We are finding ourselves in the desert. As a matter of fact, Behar, it's kind of like a flashback. We're standing at Mount Sinai. Moses is talking to the people about land reform, land ownership, preservation of the environment, human rights. Now, how strange is that? We just figured out we're in the desert, Mount Sinai, wilderness, right? And yet here we meet the rules of the sabbatical year. For 6 years, farmers are to work the land, but during the 7th year, the land is to lie fallow. God created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th, so we are to work 6 days out of the week, and on the 7th day, the Sabbath, we are to rest from our labors. And then for 6 years, we are to plow, to plant, to harvest. But on the 7th year, we must let the land go untouched, fallow. 7s are very important in Jewish lore. And just as we prepare our lives so that our financial needs do not require us to work 7 days a week, so must we handle our food supplies so that during the 7th year, we're supposed to live off of the accumulated surplus, and thank God, we can also eat that which grows by itself. So we're not talking about a 12-month fast here, but we're talking about a severe limitation on working the land. And now, 6 days work, 7, 6 years, and then 7th year lie fallow. 7 sevens are 49. On the 50th year is a jubilee year, 7 sevens, and all the land that had been lost by forfeiture or by sale for whatever reason has to be returned to the original owner. Landlessness must never become permanent. Now, there are some really serious principles at play here. First principle, and we've mentioned this one before, imitate God. God created the world in 6 days, rested on the 7th. We work on 6 days, we rest on the 7th. Fine. That's what we call the pursuit of holiness. We do as God has done. Fine. We got that. We've talked about it before. Second principle. Humans don't really own anything. The earth is the eternal and the fullness thereof. The earth belongs to God. I remember visiting some of the largest, grandest multi-floor apartments in Manhattan. The hosts were the apartment owners, and they were unfailingly gracious time after time. Many were charitable in the finest sense. Many were also good friends. But they thought they actually owned their own dwellings, really owned. But our text says only God really owns anything. Now, I have to tell you the truth, I don't recall that I ever paused to drive that point home to my hosts. I guess one can be too polite. It just didn't occur to me I could say, hey, you don't really own this place. Reese and I hiked to Joshua Tree National Park here in California a couple of weeks ago. Springtime for cacti. It was gorgeous, glorious colors. We even saw a sidewinder rattlesnake. Terrific. So who owns that national park? Who really owns it? Do Scott Pruitt and the EPA own that land to do with as they will? Our text says only God really owns anything. It's a very humbling thought. Third principle, economic inequality is not a desirable feature of human society. It's fascinating that the Torah itself is of two minds with regard to poverty, and those two minds come across 3 verses apart. Deuteronomy 15:4 says, there shall be no needy among you, the eternal your God will bless you. Trust in God, no one will ever lack for anything. 3 verses later, it states, if, however, there is a needy person among you, you must open your hand and lend whatever is sufficient to meet the need. Different points of view, 3 verses apart. The famed commentator Abravanel actually found purposes for poverty. Purposes for poverty. In response to poverty, because it's there, others are encouraged to learn how to act with generosity. Without poverty, you wouldn't have that. How to extend care without checking for qualifications. A poor person stands before you, don't question. And thirdly, how to build a loving and caring community. There needs to be poor people, Abravanel seems to be saying, so as to strengthen our own moral virtues. Okay, a stretch. Be that as it may, the third principle still is that economic inequality is generally not a desirable thing. Fourth principle, not only do we not own anything, no land, anything else, but we are in fact required to care for the land. In Genesis, remember way back in Genesis, Adam and Eve were commanded to be fruitful and to multiply and to subdue the land. But inherent in that command to subdue is the notion of stewardship. Stewardship, not selfish disregard. That is why Deuteronomy warns us, for example, that when our armies place a city under siege, we are not to cut the trees surrounding the town down. Don't cut the trees down. The statement in Deuteronomy, what, are you making war against trees? Bad thing to do. We also need to care for animals. We even have to show humane concern for animals we are preparing for the slaughter. It is as if we are being told that having created the world, God has stepped aside and appointed us to serve as agents of the divine in protecting creation. Question: have you ever heard of eco-Zionism, eco-ECO? Well, first of all, I would recommend that you read the great chapter written by Dr. Alon Tal in that wonderful book, The Fragile Dialogue, of which I happen to be co-editor. Set that aside. Alon Tal asserts that as a people, we have collective responsibility to ourselves. Of course, as a people, we have responsibility for ourselves. But as Zionists, we also have collective responsibility for the land of Israel. In the early history of Aliyah, the Chalutzim often sacrificed the needs of the land for the needs of the collective, and that made, I guess, a certain kind of sense. If you want to really cry a little bit, check out the history of the draining of the Hula Lake for a solid example as to what well-intentioned, non-informed Chalutzim could do to the land. Tal claims that with Israel today economically strong and growing stronger, we have a Zionist obligation to repair the damage that early settlers did to the land. And we must fight against anything that can privilege the deprivation of nature, just so that major corporations can enhance their profits. We call that eco-Zionism, and it's a serious concern. Nehama Leibovitz, when commenting on our Sedra, wrote this really powerful sentence. Listen. The sensation of mine is fraught with danger. I love that. The sensation of mine is fraught with danger. If you put our 4 principles together, we can summarize them in that one sentence. The sensation of mine is fraught with danger. Imitate God by giving the land rest. We don't really own anything. We must fight to eliminate economic inequality, and we must exercise stewardship in our relationship to the earth's environment. Stop being so concerned with mine. Well, that's it for now. Chazak, chazak v'nit chazek. Let us be strong, let us be strong. Let us strengthen one another. Look for the creamed herring. And please, as a way of strengthening one another, hit share. Shabbat Shalom. Have a great week.